Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you. I'm over here on Blue Sky at Santita Jackson. .bsky.social. Please join me over there. And I'm still on X, yes, at Santita J or the Santita Jackson Show, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. If you tune in, you can hang out with Bernadette and Shalom Robert, all of my Morning Star family. They're going to be over there. We're coming over now. Come on over, everybody. Thumbs up, like. Help us with the algorithm, everybody, okay? Help us with the algorithm. And I'm streaming on the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. Please know this. I have two Facebook pages. One they call the landing page. That's Santita Jackson. But the only place where I can really interact with you is Santita Jackson and Friends. Many of you, oh my goodness, literally about they cut you off at 5,000, and so what they're doing is kicking you off of my platform on Santita Jackson. They won't do that at Santita Jackson and Friends. Okay, so please become my friend over there, because that's the only place that I can accept friends on Facebook. So let's get right there, and everybody, please like and share the show. Bernadette, please thumbs up. Robert, please give me some thumbs up. All the people I can't see, thumbs up, thumbs up. I've got this brilliant young man with us. He's part of the family here. Bryce Green, soon to be Dr. Bryce Green, of course. He's from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, PhD candidate, University of Indiana. And he does so much brilliant research. And this is a story. Everybody, please, thumbs up, please. Thank you for giving me one thumb up, but I need all the thumbs up. Thumbs up. Help us with the algorithm, everybody. Help us, help us, help us. Nobody's going to help us but us. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. If you don't like the show, people won't look for it and it gets suppressed on Facebook and on X and every place else. But when you like and share, we've had some of our shows in the not too distant past have gotten like 1.5 million views plus. But I need you to like it and pass it along, okay? All right, everybody, like and share, like and share, like and share. We have been sitting with this, well, with the Gaza conflict, with the Palestinian conflict now for almost 80 years. But since October 7th, wow, it has not only become more urgent, Palestinian justice and Israeli security, because my father's often said that they're married to each other. But now the Palestinians have a voice that we have not heard in this discourse in almost 80 years, Dr. Bryce Green. Yes, I am calling that into existence. You're almost there.
A little premature. A little
No,
premature. Don't jinx it.
no. I'm not jinxing it. I'm believing in it. How about that part? But soon to be Dr. Bryce Green. We're so proud of you and the work that you're doing. And indeed, you have done so much research on Ukraine, and you've helped us to understand that. And now we're looking at really a humanitarian disaster. I think it would be fair to say that that's what we're seeing. We're seeing even on legacy media, we're seeing the torrential rains in Gaza, and you have tent cities. The problem is people are sleeping in mud. People are having babies that they're having to bury because it is very cold over there, and it is just a horrifying condition. And they have a famine. They have a famine. So what does that mean? They have a famine. And what does it mean when they're playing with the numbers? So when we see these children who clearly have been starved to death, or who are starving to death, they're telling us that we're not seeing what we're seeing, that my eyes are lying to me. So I need you to help me to understand what's going on, because it seems that our administration is manufacturing they're manufacturing really a false narrative that the famine is not really occurring. So help me to understand, Bryce, what we're seeing here, because it's something that's not being discussed. Hey, everybody, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. I'm so glad you all are tuning in. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Help me understand what we're looking at, Price.
So, a lot of conflicts around the world are there aren't a lot. There isn't a lot of information about them. There aren't a lot of organizations that are covering it. Not a lot of media who are talking about it, and not a lot of solutions that are being offered. But Palestine is unique in that it's such a massive topic of conversation, and that if you look at the press closely, especially in Israel, they will talk a lot about what's going on, about what the Israeli leaders have in store for Gaza. And we've known this since the beginning of this phase of the conflict. Since October 7th, the Israelis have been pretty clear about their intent to further seal off the Gaza Strip, already hermetically sealed, but their plans were to seal it off even more, to restrict electricity, food, water, aid, medical supplies, other essentials to life, prevent them from getting into the Strip in order to harm the population to the point where they no longer believe that Hamas, the ruling party in the Strip, is a legitimate ruler. So they've announced that their plans are to target the civilian population repeatedly, over and over again. But what's unique about this conflict is that there is an apparatus of government officials, media people, rights organizations within Israel, and other political actors whose sole goal is to obscure that reality, is to cast doubt on what's actually going on, to look at the children being shot in the head, to look at the lies that are being told, to look at the bombs being dropped on refugee camps, and to say that this isn't what it looks like. This isn't an indiscriminate attack against the civilian population. This is a targeted and precise and surgical operation to remove this terrorist organization from power. But that's not the case. And one of the cases in which this is really clear is the situation in northern Gaza right now. Since October, Israel has been implementing something that's called the General's Plan for northern Gaza. What is the General's Plan? Well, this is the name given to the documents presented by former retired General Giora Island, who is a massive hawk, insane person, crazy views on the Strip, a guy who believes that an epidemic among Palestinians in Gaza would be beneficial to Israel for its war aims. So he puts together a document that's about what exactly should be done in northern Gaza. The Israelis, since they have invaded Gaza, have bisected the southern part and northern part of Gaza by creating what's called a corridor. And there's been a lot of reporting about how this corridor is essentially a free fire zone where they kill civilians, even if they're hundreds of meters away from the alleged border. But what the General's Plan calls for is essentially extending that kill zone to the entirety of the north. The plan is to remove the population, tell them to leave, drop leaflets, say, if you don't leave, you're going to be murdered, you'll be treated like a terrorist, and then to restrict all food, water, and aid, even more than they already are, from the north, and then to declare that zone a free fire zone, and then anyone caught in that will be treated like a legitimate military target. So this is what they're doing in the north of Gaza. This has been reported repeatedly by the Israeli press over and over again. It's been criticized in the alternative pro-Palestinian media. It's mentioned in the the United States press occasionally, but it's often downplayed. So this is the context of the situation in northern Gaza. And what I wrote about was that a U.S.-funded organization, this isn't an independent, this isn't Human Rights Watch or anything, this is the U.S. government's own project. It's called the Famine Early Warning Systems Network. And they basically monitor different areas around the world. They monitor, Congo, Sudan, Lebanon, for the early warning signs of an impending famine. And what they reported in right before Christmas was that there is an ongoing famine scenario in northern Gaza as a result of this Israeli policy of restricting food and aid. Now, we turn to this apparatus of obfuscation that I was talking about. The U.S. ambassador to Israel, a man named Jack Lew, he posted, this was, I think, a day or two after FuseNet dropped their report, he posted a statement with, U.S. State Department letterhead, criticizing the report. It says that the report issued on by FuseNet is relying on outdated and inaccurate data as the basis of its report. Now, what data are they criticizing? They're criticizing the fact that FuseNet cited a number from the UN of the number of civilians in northern Gaza. They said that the number could be between 65 and 75,000. And based on those numbers, we acknowledge that the amount of aid getting into the Strip is not enough to sustain that population. And therefore, we are raising the warnings about a impending and ongoing famine scenario in northern Gaza. So the ambassador says that these numbers are outdated. Israel, as part of its general's plan, has actually cleansed the area of many of the civilians, and so that the number of civilians are actually within the range of 7 to 15,000, and that's according to Israel's own numbers. So he claimed that the FuseNet used these outdated numbers of these outdated larger numbers while ignoring the smaller updated numbers. Well, if we actually look at this report, it's not long. It's very easy to read, but apparently no one did. Not even the New York Times, when they reported on this. They started reporting on it as a dispute. They started reporting, all other sorts of places started reporting on this as a disagreement between experts about what the numbers are. But again, that's not what's actually in the report. The report itself does cite the higher, earlier numbers from November, 65 to 75,000 people still remaining in northern Gaza. But immediately afterwards, it cites the UNRWA numbers from December 22nd, just days before the report was released, that puts the number at between 10 and 15,000. So the idea that this report is based on inaccurate numbers is completely false. And in fact, the report was very clear about how difficult it is to track facts and figures in a situation like northern Gaza, in Gaza on the whole. They make it clear that this will have to be, any designation about the conditions has to be based off of extrapolation, intuition, and the best numbers that we have. But the idea that they didn't include these lower, later estimates is completely false. They're cited right there in the report in plain English. Ambassador Jack Lew, maybe he didn't read the report, maybe he did and he's just lying. Maybe the New York Times didn't read the report, maybe they did and they're just lying. We can't know, but I wouldn't put it past them. But the fact is that this entire manufactured dispute is based off something that isn't a dispute at all. And what's surprising about this is that even FuseNet, which is, as I said, funded by the U.S. government through USAID, the United States Agency for Aid and Development, they retracted this report. They actually removed it from their website and on their dashboard. If you go to their dashboard, I didn't check it today, but as of yesterday, Gaza is completely removed from their dashboard. They have a world map that has, Lebanon, Sudan, the Congo, Yemen, all of these hotspots in the region. But Gaza is completely omitted. Now, you can still find the report based on from the Wayback Machine, but the fact that they removed it shows you the power of this apparatus I was talking about. These lobbying organizations that are able to obscure. I'm sorry.
No, you have to help me to understand. Gaza's not there.
It's not there. If you look at they have a world map on their dashboard, and if you look at the world map, you see all of these areas highlighted. Like the country of Lebanon is highlighted. You can go and click on Lebanon and read the reports. The country of Yemen is highlighted. You can click on Yemen, read the reports. Sudan, highlighted. Click on it, read the reports. Same with Congo. Same with a lot of other countries around the world. But Gaza is not. Even though that their website still has these reports about Gaza, their dashboard deliberately obscures this fact. And again, this is an organization that is ostensibly designed to raise warnings about potential famine situations.
Well, let me ask you this. Well, what is in its place? Is it just Israel?
Nothing. They have Israel, they have the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, but it's not highlighted. You have to search for the Gaza reports. They're not serving these reports up to you on their map. So, I wish I could, share
No, no,
this
no.
screen on radio, but
No, but I'm trying to, because I'm thinking Benjamin Netanyahu, just weeks before the October 7th attacks, when he made his presentation, part of his presentation to the United Nations was a map of the greater Middle East. And there was no Palestine there. Just,
right.
I mean, this is sounding like that.
Yeah, and it's part of the larger trend of erasure of Palestine from these discourses in mainstream respectable organizations. The U.S. government has actually assessed that uh, Israel is blocking aid, not just to northern Gaza, but all of Gaza. The USAID, they did a report, they did an investigation, and they found that the primary uh, barrier to aid entering the strip is Israel, is all these restrictions, formal and informal. But the actual State Department, Anthony Blinken, they didn't publicize the report. They actually buried it. And when it came to light that they had done so, they said that, yes, we saw this report, but we came to different conclusions. Well, what are these conclusions based on? We don't know. We're never going to know because the U.S. has decided to take Israel's word at face value for everything, even against their own analysts, even against the people that they pay to find out these things. The U.S. government has decided to ignore them in favor of listening to public relations releases from the State of Israel. Now, this is obviously ridiculous, obviously harmful. You can definitely have a legitimate debate about what numbers are most accurate, about how inaccurate they are, what's the best way to go about estimating these sorts of things. But what is not legitimate is to cast doubt on the fact that there is a dire humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. It's not legitimate to deliberately obscure that reality. It's not legitimate to suppress your own organization's reporting that contradicts what your political allies seem to be saying. But that's what America's doing right now. That's what Ambassador Jack Lew is doing, and that's what FuseNet, which is an organization that does good work, they're succumbing to pressure from the U.S. government and their funders to suppress their findings about Gaza. And this is all in the service of Israel, all in the service of their settler project, all in the service of this greater Israel, greater Middle East project that's hatched by both the rabid Zionists and the neocons that support them.
Everybody, we're talking with Bryce Green, fairness and accuracy in reporting, brilliant writer, activist, and PhD candidate, University of Indiana. And he has been someone who has been organizing, not just for the ceasefire, but he's also been doing union organizing. He's just someone who's been very, very much involved in the community. Ashley King from Memphis said Bryce Green needs our attention and help because he will be targeted. But that's something clearly that you do not mind. Because you have already been targeted. You had something that happened to you this year, earlier this year, right? Last semester?
Yeah, well, last
semester, last year. Yeah.
Oh, well, yes. As part of my organizing work with Palestine and the Union, I've been very outspoken on my campus. I'm not scared of using my name and using my yapping ability for the greater good. But during the encampment movement, where all these encampments were going up around the country, there was one at Indiana University, and I helped with organizing it. But I was targeted for arrest as a result of my activities. We actually have the radio of the sniper that they put on the roof that was aimed at me, talking about how I'm the main actor. And we later got body cam footage of the police on the ground, the riot police. I mean, they had military levels of force. They had armored vehicle. They had drones flying overhead. They had a helicopter, assault weapons, grenade launchers, riot shields, all of that. But these guys, they said that, okay, well, your job is to go and snatch up Black Afro guy. Well, I'm Black Afro guy. And they did this because I was loud on the megaphone, and they appeared to want to send a message. And after my arrest, they tried to ban me from campus for 5 years. Now, this obviously was reversed because that's insane, but they've continued to target me over the past semester. I was cited by the Student Conduct Board for speaking after curfew at an assembly that ran after the speech restriction policy said that we're not allowed to assemble and speak. In fact, I'm currently on disciplinary probation for my organizing. So, maybe you are speaking too soon about this whole doctor business. But that's all small potatoes. There are people dying. There are people whose homes are being razed. These little inconveniences can't get in the way of the organizing that's necessary to bring light to these issues and to actually do something to change the country's policy. I mean, this is the belly of the beast, right? Nothing that happens anywhere in the world is untouched by what America does.
What do you mean?
Therefore, what I mean is that America is the global superpower, and America sets the table that everyone else sits at. Even Russia and China, which are rising superpowers, they live in America's world. At the end of World War II, Time magazine, Henry Luce coined the term the American century, because this was a time where America had, unmatched power. They had half the world's wealth. They were the only country that was almost completely unscathed by World War II. And they were able to use that to create what we now call the rules-based order. But of course, what that means in practice is that America rules and orders everyone around. And so when we look at these issues that happen in Palestine, in Ukraine, in Congo, in Yemen, in Taiwan, in Georgia, all of these are linked to this broader process of American imperialism. In Palestine, Israel only exists the way it does today, is only able to operate on the world stage because America says that it's okay. Without America, Israel would have been fingered as a rogue state and taken to The Hague and had to adjust its behavior years ago, decades ago, before I was even born. But because America says, Israel, you can continue your apartheid system, you can continue your genocide, you can continue blockading Gaza in the medieval siege, because America is able to do that, or because America does that, that means Israel is able to persist. So any change that you want to happen in Israel, it has to start here. They're not going to change their behavior alone, especially when they're being bankrolled to the tune of $22 billion in the last year alone by Uncle Sam. They're not going to change their behavior. That starts with us. It starts with Americans, American institutions, American tax dollars need to cease flowing to Israel if they're going to change. If Palestine is going to have any chance for freedom, for liberation, for security, for the end of apartheid, the end of genocide, that starts here in America.
We're talking with Bryce Green, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. What do you think, everybody? What do you think? Did you know about the famine? Have you seen the newborn children who are skinny, who clearly look like they have been starving to death? You see parents walking with their children covered up because they have died, and the children are not able to eat. And they are living in conditions that are subhuman at best. But I'm struck by something that President Biden said at one time. He said, if Israel didn't exist, we would have to invent it. What do you think he meant by that?
No, well, what he means is pretty clear. They talk about Israel as America's unsinkable aircraft carrier, the only democracy in the Middle East. But what that means essentially is that Israel is an extension of this system that we call the American empire, right? It's not just the U.S. government. It's not just your congressman, the president, the Supreme Court. It's not just the state. It's the apparatus of everything that dominates the state. That's your mega corporations. That's your militarists, your generals, the people who have designs on world domination. And if Israel didn't exist, then there would be a lot more stability in the Middle East and a lot less reason for the U.S. to be involved in the various crises that happen over there. We look back at something like the invasion of Iraq, for example. Well, why do we go into Iraq? Well, conventional critical wisdom is to say that it's about oil. Well, oil for whom exactly? Well, the American oil companies didn't really have much to do with it. In fact, they recommended against overthrowing Saddam Hussein. It was Israel who said that we want to go topple Saddam. We want to break up this the secular Arab nationalist faction. People like Assad in Syria, people like Saddam Hussein. We want to break that up in order to get, in part, oil from these Iraqi regions to keep flowing to Israel. Israel doesn't have a lot of friends in the region. Israel doesn't have a lot of its own oil reserves. So where are they gonna come from? And so in the 90s, there was a document called the Clean Break document, which essentially laid out a plan for a greater Israel, and it was supported by a lot of neoconservative figures in America. People like Douglas Feith, Paul Wolfowitz, and this mirrored the Project for a New American Century document for rebuilding America's defenses that came out in 2000. Both of these documents are a plan for enhancing Western influence in the Middle East by expanding Greater Israel, by creating for America forward-facing bases in the region. These two projects are inexorably linked in ideologically and practically. I mean, some of the organizations that are pushing these sorts of policies are the same. The Center for New American Security, all these pro-Israeli think tanks. I mean, they're pushing for an interventionist policy in the Middle East aimed at dominating the oil resources of the country, and as part of that, a greater Israel that has a greater role in the region is part and parcel of that entire plan.
But is it working? When I ask, is it working? Is it working? I mean, internationally, we're constantly voted against. We in the international world, in the International Assembly, the United Nations. Now, is it Poland? The Polish prime minister said that if Netanyahu comes here, we will arrest him. You have more and more countries that are saying, they're pushing back. They're saying no. And I can't help but think that America will begin to feel this, because now this war in the Middle East is expanding. It's expanding. And Iran said, we will make you feel this, America. And that is something that is quite unsettling, Bryce Green. I mean, this is not 1945. This is 2025. It's the whole world order is beginning to change. I mean, or do you think I'm misreading things?
Oh no, I don't think you're misreading the situation at all. This question of is it working is a pretty tricky one to unpack. In the short term, we've certainly seen America succeed in toppling Saddam. We've seen America succeed in creating chaos in Syria that allowed for internecine strife within the country. We've seen recently America succeed in overthrowing Assad with the help of Turkey, Israel, and other actors in the region, and that has, in a narrow sense, been a success. But the question as to whether or not it benefits America long term, the American people long term, is a completely different one. And the answer to that would be absolutely not. In many empires, I mean, it's the public who pays for the upfront investments, and it's the top 1% who's reaping the profits off of that, who's reaping the military contracts, who's getting that oil, who's advancing their geopolitical goals. But the general public is essentially screwed in this arrangement, and we're seeing it more and more, especially under the Biden administration. The 1-2 punch of the Ukraine war and then the Gaza genocide has done so much to diminish America's stature on the world stage. I mean, it had been diminishing for quite some time. The Bush 2 years were certainly turbulent, and they caused a lot of strife around the world. But under Biden, with the Ukraine war and the Gaza genocide, the rest of the world now has an opportunity to say no to this rules-based order, in part because of the rise of Russia and China as counterbalances to this unipolarity that America has relied upon since 1945. Unipolarity meaning that there is only one power with the power to dictate most of what happens around the world. With the rise of the Soviet Union, it was bipolar. With the fall of the Soviet Union in the 90s, they had this unipolar moment where they essentially said that we can rule the world. Wesley Clark, American general, he reported that he was given a document in the wake of 9/11 that showed that the neocons and the pro-Israel people within the Bush administration, they had planned on taking out 7 countries within 5 years. And of course, they didn't succeed in that narrow goal, but over time, these 7 countries were targeted, overthrown, blown up. You had Libya, Afghanistan, Sudan, Iraq, Yemen. Like all these countries were being essentially destroyed by U.S. empire. But this is the logic of unipolarity. With Ukraine, after the U.S. provoked Russia into invading by refusing to negotiate about NATO expansion, by continuing to threaten NATO expansion explicitly by saying that we're going to maintain an open door policy, knowing that Russia found that to be a red line. They provoked this war, and then they went to all these countries around the world and said that you need to put sanctions on Russia. You need to cut off Russia from your economy. You need to punish Russia for doing this horrible thing, like invading another country. Well, many countries around the world, they saw it purely as hypocrisy. They saw America's obstinate stance towards negotiations. They saw America's history of invading other countries. And they said, most importantly, they saw that China was offering a path for development that didn't require them to be subservient to American dictates. So all these countries around the world, they saw that and they said, well, we're choosing the other way. We're choosing to make our own foreign policy, make our own economic policy, join our own alliances outside of what Washington and Wall Street believe is best for us. And that trend accelerated when you see this genocide in Gaza. Whenever there's a UN vote in support of Palestine or having anything to do with Palestine, the rest of the world is really unanimous. There isn't a lot of disagreement as to who's at fault, what is the path forward, how should we get out of this mess. There's not a lot of disagreement among the world. UN votes are incredibly and notoriously lopsided in this regard.
No, there is virtually no disagreement. You've got the United States, Israel, and the Micronesian Islands, which have like 2 or 3 people per island.
Right.
That we control. I'm not being, well, maybe that was a little snarky, but everybody, that's really what it comes down to. And it is well, and that's why when we talked about Ukraine, I mean, this is just to tie all of this together. You and Dr. David Gibbs, the author of the book, The Revolt of the Rich, you were among the few persons, and Dwight McKee, and just a few people who said, this is not going to work. And, people became very angry with me. And I said, look, I know African leaders. I'm trying to help you to understand. I don't just visit Africa. We know the leadership there. When Nelson Mandela was a terrorist, which he was, according to our government, even as president, his representatives, when he was in prison, used to stay at my parents' home. So I know these folks. And these leaders have a different relationship with China. They have a different relationship with Russia. I said, and they have a different relationship with India. I said, these people are not going to sign. You talked about this. You did the research. So they're not going to sign on to Ukraine. And more, and now you've got South Africa that has pushed back against Israel, and they've done it at their peril because they have been threatened and they have soldiered on. And not almost, but they have been daring them to come for them. there's something else going on in the world, and I don't want us to miss the zeitgeist. I think the spirit of the times is moving us in another direction. It has been written and documented that the next century will be the century of the African. I mean, they are having a population explosion, and they more and more they are pushing Europe out. They say, we, you know why we don't quarrel with Russia? Because they didn't colonize us. We've had a different relationship with them all along. I'm just trying to tell you all. And then Ashley King from Memphis said African Americans are expected to stay in our lane and not talk about foreign policy. I hear you. And maybe this might be an unusual discussion for some people to be watching or hearing, and as they see two Black people, two Black Americans talk about this. But, you know, my father's often said, look, no one should be, we should be at the front of the foreign policy discussions since we came over here on a foreign policy. The oligarchs needed workers, and the oligarchs need lithium and all of these tremendous minerals that you can only find in Africa and some of these places in Haiti. I mean, Bryce Green, I'm wondering if we, I mean, the, it seems like we are, well, I don't know. I don't think Americans are as blind to this as we have been in the past. You know, I think what shifted?
No,
What
I agree.
something shifted, and what happened, and when did it shift?
Well, so that there's a number of things that have contributed to the shift away from complacency and towards a more critical view of America's foreign policy. One is that the American standard of living is declining rapidly, and it's far far less than it was 50 years ago, when you could say that all of this empire business is actually doing doing you guys a solid. It's actually improving the lives of Americans at home. Now, there was a time when you can credibly make that argument, but now these days, I mean, since the neoliberal era under Reagan, all through Obama, through Trump, through Biden, all of these policies that have stripped the middle class of their wealth, that have hollowed out American institutions, that have saddled more costs onto Americans, that have made it so that most Americans do not believe that their children will live a better life than them.
Mhm.
Well, people start to ask why. People start to ask, why is it that we're able to fund a $3 trillion war in Iraq when I am in medical debt because I wanted to get some tests at a hospital? Why is it that we're spending $22 billion funding Israel's genocide, where the Biden administration removed COVID era protections for people, the child tax credit, the rental, the eviction moratorium, the extra unemployment benefit? Why did all that go away while I'm watching American dollars being dropped from the sky over Gaza? People are, and of course, people have access to a greater media environment now. There aren't just three networks and four newspapers telling you what to think that are all owned by the 1%. And now there are platforms that allow people to have more critical views without the threat of censorship. Now, of course, it's not perfect, and you've heard me talk a lot about the ways in which this platformization of news could actually be sort of a walled garden, but it's far better than the gatekeeper model that was inherent in the networks and the news and the legacy media. So people have access to alternative perspectives, analyses, and opinions. So combine those two things, progressively worse conditions and progressively richer information environments, well, then you're going to have people start to question their government a lot more, start to be more active in pushing for a greater change. Now, one of the overriding things that's making the situation uh, unavoidable for both the elites and for the average person is the international situation. America can't be the unipolar power anymore. America can't push around countries like Russia and China. Uh, Look at Libya, for example. When the U.S. Under Obama intervened in Libya, essentially destroying the richest country in Africa, The Russians and Chinese, they really stood down. The Russians didn't veto the Security Council proposal to intervene. The Chinese didn't do so either. And the U.S. was able to do whatever it wanted with Libya. And now look at Libya. Now look at the open air slave markets. Look at the competing warlords that are decimating the country. Is that better than before? No. So with these lessons, a more powerful Russia and a more powerful China is able to push back against the U.S. domination of the entire world. One thing that I think you've talked about on your show a little bit is the process of de-dollarization. The reason that America's standard of living was so good relative to others was because America had this free lunch in the form of the dollar. The US dollar being the world's reserve currency meant that all these countries around the world who wanted to participate in international trade were seeking out US dollars. What this meant is that the value of the US dollar was so immense that a lot of the spending that America did ended up being financed by these third countries, by these countries who needed to get dollars. But that's starting to change slowly but steadily. You talk to economists like Michael Hudson. He'll talk about how these BRICS countries, BRICS is the name given to this block of countries that now makes up around 40% of the global economy and a sizable chunk of the global population. Something like half the population is in a BRICS country. These countries are now starting to talk about ways to get away from the dollar, ways to have international settlement mechanisms that are outside of what Washington can leech onto and extract wealth from. Well, if that accelerates and if that continues, as all the signs point to happening, well, then that's going to take away what's called America's exorbitant privilege. And it's going to force America and Americans to really rethink their relationship with the rest of the world. Are they going to be able to continue to be a rogue state? Are they going to continue to support genocides? Are they going to continue to provoke great powers by threatening to place nuclear missiles on their borders? In a true multipolar world, the answer would be no. Those things would not be even considered to be possible in that world. That's the world that we're headed towards. That's the world that American elites are looking at and reacting to now. That's the world that these neocons and these Zionists are looking at and trying to forestall by going for broke in Israel, by fighting Russia to the last Ukrainian, despite the fact that those people are essentially living in a shattered state now. But that's why the American empire is behaving in the way that it is now. And that's why we're seeing more and more protests. That's why we're seeing the military levels of violence being used against protesters like me for speaking out. That's why we're seeing big tech crack down hard on the way that they're controlling people's speech. That's why we're seeing all of these changes to consolidate power at the top in this last gasp of the American empire. I think that over the next few decades, the world that we read about or that you experienced in the 20th century is going to be a distant memory, and we're going to really have to readjust our place in the world.
We are going to have to readjust our place in the world. Indeed, Ashley, you're real active here today from Memphis. He said this is a very constructive conversation that is pro-American without being exploitative. And you're right. I mean, because I think that if you love America, you reserve the right to criticize America. You've got to engage and critique. That's the only way that you get better. People tell you where you are in error, and they help you to fix the error. No one and nothing is correct all the time. No one. And so I need you to help me to understand. How do you think our stance in the Middle East is impacting us abroad and then domestically, in that order?
Abroad, our standing in the Middle East is tarnishing our reputation, for one. It's becoming increasingly unpopular to be supportive of Israel the way that we are. In fact, it's well known that we are the almost the sole reason that Israel is able to continue on the way that it's been doing. Other countries around the world, China, African countries, all these countries are looking at the way America is supporting this genocide, running political cover in international institutions, ignoring their own experts, as I talked about earlier, in order to justify Israel's actions. They're seeing that, and they're realizing that you really shouldn't trust these people. And what we're seeing with the Middle East is that under Trump, the U.S. left the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, and under Biden,
the Paris Accords.
Oh well, yeah, these were designed to keep Iran from getting a nuclear weapon in exchange for sanctions relief and in exchange for monitoring mechanisms. This was agreed to by the Obama administration, all these European countries, Iran, all these other countries. They shook hands and said, "Great, we made a deal." Under Trump, Trump abandoned this deal. He said, "We're no longer going to adhere to it. Take it or leave it, or rather, just leave it." The Biden administration came into office campaigning on trying to revive this deal, but they refused to engage with Iran in any serious way, which resulted in the deal not being signed for the entirety of his administration. So if you're an outsider looking in, and you're looking at America, and you look at the deals that it's trying to make, you realize that you can't really make a deal with these people. It's the same thing in Ukraine, right? The Ukraine crisis has its roots in the promise that the U.S. made to Russia not to expand NATO beyond East Germany. This has been disputed, but it's very obviously true based on archival research. Mary Surratt is the leading expert on that. But the U.S. said they weren't going to do this. And then over the next 2 decades, they did just that. And when Russia came to the table, they said, "Will you please sign an agreement that says you will not expand NATO?" They said, "Well, we won't sign any agreement. What we're going to do is maybe give you a verbal commitment." Well, the verbal commitment was just broken. You can't make a deal with these people. They see the economic, it's essentially a mafia. The way that if you don't adopt policies that are friendly to Wall Street, to Washington, to American corporations, well, then places like the IMF can crush your economy. They can say, "We're not giving you any more loans. And if you do want these loans, then you have to alter your policy. You have to cut pensions. You have to cut public services. You have to privatize your economy." Countries see that, and they're saying, "Absolutely not." So all of these trends create a situation in which the U.S. can no longer maintain its global hegemony with any sort of credibility. And especially when you have alternatives like China and the Belt and Road Initiatives, who are actually building things around the world and building things within their own economy. Well, then this is the stage is set for the decline of American power. And it's really only a question of how American elites will react to it. Domestically, which is the second part of your question.
Yes.
Well, this means that there'll be greater emphasis on extracting wealth outside of the public sector. Right now, we're seeing this with the Trump administration's the Department of Government Efficiency. Effectively, it's a way to accelerate some of the neoliberal trends of privatization, of hollowing out the public sector, the public sphere, but only putting it under one umbrella. And it's explicitly ran by some of the richest people in America for the benefit of the richest people in America. They're barely even hiding it now. And so as this situation progresses, the American public will be saddled with more and more debt. They'll have access to fewer and fewer public services, and the quality of life will be less and less and less. I mean, this is a trend that we're seeing. No one my age, I'm 26. No one my age thinks that 10 years from now, America will be in a good position. They don't. No one thinks that our children will have better lives than us. In fact, most people my age don't even want to have children. There's a serious argument in my cohort about whether or not having a child in this state in America is even a moral act. There are people who are, they're giving up hope, essentially.
No,
There's
no, you got it because you gotta unpack that for me. I know we're up against time, but I'll let this run a little bit longer because you got to unpack that for me because I'm old enough to be your mother, and I have my nieces and nephews are your age, and I need to understand where you are coming from because indeed it is your generation who are pushing on the Middle East. It is your generation who are pushing for the 4 day work week. You're saying I'm not going to give everything to this job, and I want to do things that fulfill me. I mean, you have a very very different view of things, and you all marry. Uh, Same sex marriage is not the issue. Interracial marriage, you all do what I mean. You are in a whole different space and place. So I need you to help me to understand just where you are. And I want you all to stay tuned here. Many of you will be, here on AM 950 radio. Some of you will still be here on the Santita Jackson Show. I need you to give me thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Help us with the algorithm. A lot of you are tuning in today. Thumbs up, like and share the show, like and share the show. But I need you to like the show because it helps us with the algorithm. We've been having a lot of blessings here, Bryce Green, because indeed many of us have we're seeing several shows that have gotten more than 1 million views. And it's because of you. And we need you to like and share the show, and continue to follow Bryce Green. Continue to follow Bryce Green. The more that you follow him, the more cover you give him. Ashley, that has been your concern and mine. It's not my fear, but I know that the more public support that he has for this tremendous, tremendous intellectual ministry that he's got, the more public support he has.
intellectual ministry, dang.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is. Because and I've seen some intellectual giants who, I've had the privilege of knowing Reverend Dr. James Bevel and met Dr. King several times. I was a little girl that just my feet couldn't even reach the end of the chair because I'm as old as his youngest child. And Bayard Rustin and just so many people who and Jack Odell, who Dr. King, indeed John Kennedy, asked Dr. King to fire him because he was so progressive. He had been a merchant marine and he had been a socialist. He'd looked at communism. He was someone who was just a big, 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 big guy and he had a lot of brilliant ideas. And John Kennedy said, as you go forward, he's the guy you need to get rid of. Well, my father ended up hiring him to start our international affairs department. And so I see you in that tradition. And so, yeah, it's an intellectual ministry because you're using your mind, this tremendous intellect you have, for someone other than yourself. And that to me is very important because only what we do for Christ shall last. Now, that's my religious calling, but everybody's got one or they do not. I just know that life is so much bigger than our individual lives. And that's what I see with you, Bryce Green. And I'll add more to it before I take anything away. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Stay right here, everybody. Continuing this conversation with Bryce Green. You need to explain to me on the Santita Jackson Show, everybody, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, like and share, like and share, like and share, like and share. You could go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and see the rest of this interview as I'm talking to him because I'm always fascinated by what he says. You said your generation, because I said you all look at things differently. You're like, oh, you don't even know how. You said many of you are looking at not having children. You said maybe not marrying. Talk to me. What is going on with your generation? What is? I didn't say going wrong. I said going on. What is it that you're seeing?
Right. So, there was actually a very good set of surveys about this. I wish I could recall the numbers, but it came out recently in Adam Tooze's Chart Book newsletter. But essentially, it's about how this generation is getting married later, and they're having sex later. They're also planning to have children at a lot lower rates than previous generations, and a lot of people are asking questions like, what's wrong with this generation? Why did millennials and Gen Z kill the traditional family? But if you look at the conditions that are required to have a family, and you look at what was required to meet those conditions, say 40 years ago, 50 years ago, uh, and you compare them to now, it's not even close. Back when you were a kid, you were able to support a family based on a blue collar job that anyone could get. You could support a family as a waitress. You could buy a house. You could own
Mhm.
land, own a building. You could save for retirement on your average worker's salary. That hasn't been the case for quite some time now. In fact, if you want to own a home in America, you have to be dozens of times richer, wealthier than you would have had to have been back in the 60s. And the same with raising a child. Childcare is so much more expensive, and
Oh,
public education is being systematically destroyed. I mean, they're trying to do that in my state of Indiana right now, and so that's going to cost you more. If you do end up having the means to end up raising a child with any sort of success, well, then it's the ethical question, right? It's the ethical question of consuming under capitalism while climate catastrophe is fueled by our consumption. If you're having a kid in the first world, well, then their average yearly carbon output is going to be dramatically higher than if you had a kid in, say, Rwanda or other non-industrialized countries. So there's a real ethical question that many people in our generation are being faced with. Like, even if I had the means to have a child, is it okay to have a child that will end up contributing to the climate crisis more than any other children in the world? And
mhm.
then there's an even further ethical question. Well, let's say that you've made your peace with contributing to climate crisis for the sake of procreation. What world are you leaving your child? Is your child going to have a good life? Is your child going to be able to live and thrive in any way that's meaningful? Is your child going to be born into a society that is hyper militarized, that is sending people to go bomb countries around the world? Is your child going to live in a corporatocracy that's dominated by six corporations and a half dozen and a dozen rich people and Wall Street firms? Is that the world that you're going to send your child into? So people are having these discussions in my cohort, and they're honestly, really in depth. There are a lot of people on a lot of different sides. It runs the gamut, but the fact that these ethical issues are very real and legitimate speaks to how fractured the world that we're living in and that we're sending our children into is. And I think that if you decide not to have children, if you decide that you don't want to increase the world's burdens by having children, I think uh, that's a perfectly legitimate position to take, given all of these issues that we talked about over the last hour, and especially all the issues that we don't have time to talk about over the last hour, because this is the generation that not only has to live with all that, but they have that information beamed into their head every day. They understand what's going on more than any previous generations have. So these are the issues that people like me, people in my age cohort, are grappling with. I'm technically early Gen Z. These problems only get worse the younger you get.
What do you think America will look like?
Oh boy, I'm not good at predicting the future, but I mean, I anticipate that.
Well, this
Um,
is not a prediction. Everything is a continuum. When people say that things don't make sense, I'm like, no, 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 no. See, part of my background is in math. Everything adds up. That's why I'm grateful for having had professors who made me before you were born get Fortran paper. And that's why how I had to do my problems, literally work out problems on that, because they needed to see my Cal 1 teacher. Dr. Sachere needed to see every single step that you took, because when he looked, he could go through your steps, see your line of logic, and see where you made the right turn or you made the wrong turn. So that's why I'm asking you. I'm saying I'm not asking you to, have a crystal ball. You're not Mr. Cleo. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, just because we're on a mission creep. What did Gore Vidal say? As he was in his later years, he said, my principal disappointment in America, and he's from one of the old families in America. He said, we could have achieved civilization, but we were ambitious for empire. That's where we went wrong.
That's such a perfect way.
Civilizations, yeah, civilizations thrive. They go on and on and on and on. Empires die. They do. So that's why I'm asking you. I'm not asking you to predict. Given what you see, you're making decisions about your future because there are things that you see in it that you don't want to put other people in. So help me to see what you see. I might not be here. I want to know what you see.
If trends persist, it's not a pretty picture. Assuming that in 20 years, assuming that we've managed to keep ourselves out of the big war, the general war between these great nuclear powers that people are talking about, generals are talking about happening within 5 years. Assuming we pass all that, it still doesn't look like a pretty picture. It looks like the political system here will continue to be stagnant, will continue to be dominated by two parties that are controlled by the corporatocracy. It doesn't look like there's any chance or there's any trend towards reforming that system, wherein two parties dominated by corporations control almost 100% of the politics in the country. That looks like that'll only get worse and worse and worse. The new generation of leadership that will replace this old geriatric generation of leadership, Democrat and Republican. The new generation is only the people who have sucked up to this geriatric generation, who has done the bidding of these old, decrepit, falling apart people, and so they'll have the worldview that pretty much mirrors them. And so that it is funny, but I mean, when we're watching Nancy Pelosi walk around on a walker on the Congress floor, and watching Mitch McConnell freeze, we're watching the entire media and government apparatus pretend, oh, I didn't know Joe Biden, his brain was scrambled egg. How could I have known? Like that's all nonsense. But the people who supported those people are now going to be in charge of running the system, and those people are going to be beholden to the same interest, but only more so. And so the future that I envision is a future that's envisioned by ExxonMobil, that's envisioned by Amazon, that's envisioned by Google, Facebook, that's envisioned by BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. It's a world where wealth is controlled by a very small number of people. Public services are privatized and controlled by that same group of wealth, where if you want any chance for advancement in this world, you're going to have to make yourself useful to this corporatocracy. And internationally, if America isn't made a pariah state, then its wealth and its influence is going to decline, which decreases the amount of resources that are available for people here in the imperial core. So the situation is going to get a lot dire. There's going to be an expansion of homeless people on the streets, an expansion of police to beat up the homeless people on the streets, an expansion of the prison systems to house the people who have been beat up and put on the street, and an expansion of forced labor systems, which we already have now. I mean, who's fighting those fires in California for all those people in these private prisons who are put on the street and beat up by these intensified police? This is the future that is barreling toward us at light speed. And it's the future that motivates me to do all the activism work that I do. Because you have two choices in this world. You can either sit back, accept that this future that I just envisioned is the future, and you can be pessimistic. That's ensuring that your contribution to a better world will be zero. The other choice is to believe that there are opportunities and to grasp at those opportunities where they exist, whenever they come up. And if you do that, you have a chance. You have a chance of changing the world. The people like like the Reverend, people like Martin Luther King, people like Harriet Tubman, people like James Baldwin. I mean, if you're pessimistic, you're essentially saying that all of their work was for nothing. That you're essentially saying that the civil rights movement, all of these struggles for justice were in vain because the systems of oppression that they were fighting were so powerful that they never had a chance. Do you believe that Harriet Tubman's vision was hollow? Do you believe that Martin Luther King's dream was meaningless and fake? If not, well, then we got to keep fighting.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, so to bring it home, I mean, why is this? We've got a lot of conflicts in the world today. I mean, you've got Haiti. We don't even discuss Haiti at all. And I mean, and we've got a huge military presence and embassy there. I think that might be the largest embassy in the hemisphere outside of the United States. There's tremendous wealth. There are tremendous natural resources in Haiti that no one ever discusses. You've got President Trump talking about maybe even sending the military in to take Panama back. Which would you, if you take the canal back, you're taking back Panama. But we can't act as if manifest destiny is not only not how we got here, but how we stay here and what we do. Manifest destiny is the Middle East, right? I mean,
well, now according to Trump, it's expanding to Greenland and Panama now. So
I mean, but why is the Middle East so? Why is that? Why is that such a huge issue? I mean, you look at President Carter, and it's almost as if many will not. Well, many of us see him as such a brave soul, but then there are others, and I've read their editorials this week, essays for sure, where some people just will not forgive him for his stance on the Middle East. Indeed, Ashley says you're a freedom fighter and a superhero. Amen to that.
it's too kind.
It's true, but why is the Middle East? Why is that such a big issue?
So this goes back to, I mean, the origin of geopolitics as a field, right? When the world started getting linked up after the age of exploration, when the world started becoming manageable and people started conceptualizing themselves and their empires as global, or at least players on the global field, it was pretty clear that Eurasia was the center of the world. I can't remember what thinker said it, but it was he who controls Eurasia controls the world island. And if you're able to control the heart of Eurasia, then you're able to control the world island. Well, the Middle East is in the heart of this world island. It's on the border between, where the Mediterranean Europe meets West Asia. It's where North Africa, they all intersect here in the Middle East. And so just on a geopolitical, like a geographic scale, it's an extremely important area. But then at the turn of the century, they started discovering oil, and oil became clearly an essential part of how the world economy and the world politics was going to be ran. And so it essentially became sacred land for anyone interested in geopolitics. The Gulf monarchies, I mean, they understood that pretty clearly, and they solidified their position by throwing in their lot with the rising American and British centric empires. But now, as the world is shifting in a lot of ways that we talked about, whoever controls this area is going to be setting themselves up for the next 100 years. And as America's power is declining and other powers are rising, and independence movements and resistance movements within the region are asserting themselves, well, then it's all thrown into chaos. And the empires who had control previously are now asking themselves, what are we going to do next to control this area?
Wow. Well, I tell you, as we prepare for the homegoing service of Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter, who spoke about the real conditions in the Middle East. And he did it not hating hating Israelis, but loving them enough to be critical. And he said, it's apartheid over there. That's what it is. That's what it is, and that's wrong on any day of the week. And may peace be upon him, because I just thank God that he had the courage to do that. That having been said, I think that more and more Americans, Bryce Green, they're having the courage to say that too. And I'm wondering if they will have the platforms to do that with Meta, um, and what's happening there, and with X. I mean, how do we communicate with people, Bryce Green? I mean, the masses of people.
Well, but platforms like this, I mean, there's a lot more opportunities to reach people, to communicate, to express ideas, to share ideas, to receive ideas than there were, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
There are a lot, we all have access to this, you know, giant, vast information network. Uh, we all have access to it, but we all need to develop more sense about how to use it in a better way. I mean, there's a trend towards social mediaification of discourse that short circuits long, in-depth, thought-out explanations for the world and favors short snippets. 2 minutes. If
Mhm.
2 minutes is considered long form in this social media age. Yeah, and so we're walking a tightrope between the different ways that we're able to reach people and talk to the public. I myself just recently downloaded TikTok. Uh, uh, Most people in my generation, this is how they primarily experience the outside world, is through apps like TikTok and Instagram, and developing our ways to bridge the gap between legacy forms of communication, which have their benefits, right? You're able to say things in an article that you will never be able to convey in any depth on a TikTok. But the world moves a lot faster. And so there's gonna need to be a way to square the circle between new and old media that takes the best of both and is able to equip people with the tools that they need to affect change in their communities and in a broader world. And that's another thing about the change from, again, the time when you were a kid to the time when I was a kid. The idea of a community has dramatically shifted. Now, I've been part of communities where I've never even seen the people. You were likely part of communities where seeing people every day, every week was a core part of the experience.
Absolutely.
Well, that's different now. People have voluntary organizations, voluntary associations with people who are in vastly different geographic locations. Well, that makes it hard to do organizing within your community. So we need to figure out a way to bridge these gaps. We need to figure out a way to reach everyone, not just young people, but also people who have been felt excluded by the political system for decades and decades. It's all about finding new ways to communicate, finding new ways to organize, but it all starts with education. And again, like I said, we have the tools to educate ourselves better than we've ever had before.
Well, it's been wonderful talking with you, Bryce Green. Fairness and accuracy in reporting. Everybody, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Help us with the algorithm. A whole lot of people are watching today, and so I need you to like and share the show, like and share the show. But let's do a lot of thinking, and do some reading. Don't be too busy to do the reading. Pray for the people in California today, because they have a real crisis there. A lot of people have lost everything. And, rich or poor, when everything you have literally goes up in smoke, it's devastating. But, maybe some people who have a lot and who'll be able to get more. Um, I don't know what I don't know the lesson that is there for them, but I know there is one. And I know there is one for all of us. And so think about that today. Think about these starving children in Palestine today, because they're starving. And they're not just starving, Bryce. I think what's so galling is that they're being starved to death. And
a deliberate policy. They wrote it down.
Oh, wow. It's a deliberate policy, but what will Blinken's legacy be before we go?
Blinken's legacy will be that image of organizers and activists sitting behind him at some Senate hearing or another where Blinken is lying through his teeth about what Israel's doing. And these activists, they held up hands covered in red paint to signify the blood on Blinken's hands. The protesters have a chant, Bloody Blinken, Genocide Joe.
Mhm.
These will be the names that stick with these characters throughout history. Uh, Bob Woodward recently wrote a book that I'm in the process of reviewing that essentially covered the Biden administration's wars. And
Mhm.
it tried to paint Blinken and Biden and the others as men who tried to avoid escalation, who were fundamentally decent.
Where
Uh,
did he get that from?
we could talk. We have a long discussion about Bob Woodward and why
Okay.
he thinks what he does. But
Oh,
this
yeah.
is the image of these people that's carried on by the generation above mine. That's carried on by the generation of people like the boomers who are now in charge of the country. That's who that book was written for. People of my generation, they understand very, very clearly who Blinken is. They'll remember people like Matthew Miller as he would lie in front of God and man on that podium for these press briefings. They'll remember people like Vedant Patel who would do the same. They will remember Linda Thomas Greenfield, who sat at the UN and voted against the ceasefire. They'll remember all these people for what they are, uh, henchmen of empire willing to commit and condone murder for their own personal, professional advancement. That's what their legacy will be.
And not as the first black, the only black, someone who was liberal. No,
No,
I
no, no.
really, as history goes on, you remember for something else. You are remembered for something else, and that's what we've been talking about today. Which is why I know I kept you a little longer, but you said some things when we were on our way out, and I said I can't let you go with that because I, you are of another generation, and your generation, quite frankly, we've been working at it a long time, Bryce, but you really helped to shift the conversation about everything, particularly the Middle East. For some reason, that has been the policy that has bedeviled everybody. Indeed, that was the policy that almost derailed Reverend historic presidential campaigns. And the funny thing is now, Bryce Green, you never hear about that. But the two times my father's speech, November 3rd, 1983, at the Washington Convention Center when he was announcing, two members of the JDL jumped up. They were in the front rows. And, I think because of what happened to Malcolm, um, and the room was packed. It was thousands of people in there and thousands of people outside. It was only because my father calmed the crowd down that they were not hurt, as they jumped up and said awful things about Reverend. But all of the things that you see being leveled at people who are fighting for justice in the Middle East today, that happened to him and to us, to our family, and to our family of supporters 40 years ago, and really started when they went to the Middle East in 1979. But we've lived long enough to see things move. Um, and my prayer is that what has happened to Palestinians will not happen in them. My great grandmother used to talk about that all the time, Bryce Green. That is why Dr. King and Gandhi were so revolutionary as they talked about love. Because you don't want to be poisoned by the things that happen to you. You want to be illuminated. You don't want to be darkened. You don't want to become like your oppressor. You really want to be bettered, not embittered. And I thank you for all the work that you have done and all the work that you do. Everybody, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, and everybody like and share the show. Like and share the show. Tomorrow I think I am going to talk about Dwight Howard, the famed NBA player. He tweeted out Free Palestine, and the NBA commissioner, his agents, his business partners, and the whole league came down on him. And they said, "You better pull that down." And within minutes, he had to do that. He said, "Whoa." Tells you a whole lot about the industry, doesn't it? I think we need to talk about that. Dwight Howard have bumped into that yesterday, but no one's talking about that. So his agents and the commissioner and his business partners, I mean, they were about to unplug him. Think about that, everybody. That's the world that we're living in. And it didn't happen, and Trump didn't usher it in. This is not new. Think of Dr. King. He couldn't get into a pulpit. Bryce Green couldn't. At the end of his life, he was thinking of fasting unto the point of death or just leaving the movement. He said, perhaps I've become a distraction, because he was not popular within the Black community when he was murdered. More than 55% of Black people disapproved of him. And he could not get into the major pulpits of this country. Indeed, when my pastor, who was one of the most popular Black pastors in the country, Reverend Clay Evans, when he allowed him to speak from his pulpit, Mayor Daley, the iconic mayor in American political history, shut down every opportunity to build his church. He had a church that was going to seat 1,500 persons. 60 years ago, they were building it, and it was going to be a state-of-the-art facility. And guess what? They shut him down. Shut him down. Now, thanks be to God, he survived that. All he had to do was have 3 or 4 services. I mean, we stayed in church all day and went to church all day and all night. But because, please, everybody, and he had the best singing, the best preaching, people didn't mind. But I'm just saying to you, you know what? You can outlive these things. So, you know what? Give Bryce Green your support. He certainly deserves it. And I want to know how people can get in touch with you, Bryce, and where they can read you, because everyone, after they've heard you, and please continue to thumbs up, everybody, thumbs up, and like and share the show. Hope I'll see you tomorrow as we talk about Dwight Howard, because we're going to do that, because I want to look at how it is that his career was threatened by the commissioner of the NBA. Can you imagine, Bryce? His agents called him. Business partners called him. They said, take this tweet down and take it down now.
That's the power of the lobby.
That's the power of the lobby. So how can people get in touch with you? Where can they find you?
So you can find me on Twitter or X. My username, if you just Google Bryce Green Twitter, I'll show up. I also have a Substack where I try to post most, if not all, of my writing. So those 2 places should be the primary places where people are looking for if they want to follow my work.
Okay, and it's Green with an E, everybody. Green with an E. That's right. Robert. Yeah, wow. We're going to be talking about that tomorrow. And we're going to talk about Manifest Destiny. Yeah, Manifest Destiny. Don't act like what Trump is doing is new. No. People are still angry with President Carter for letting the Panama Canal go. They said that was a mark on his legacy. All the things that he tried to do that was humane, some people are calling a mark on his legacy. And yet my father was right almost 50 years ago, more than 40 years ago. He said, in time, we will see this decent man will be the most beloved president in our history. And I think that's it. He's become the model, and the standard by which we measure all ex-presidencies. The song goes, if I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or song, if I can steer somebody who's traveling wrong, then my living will not be in vain. I think he lived by that credo. And because he lived by that credo, because he sought to study war no more, because he wanted to be blessed and wanted to be a blessing as a peacemaker, that is why we remember him. That is why people are lined up at the Capitol right now. And that is why he continued to teach Sunday school, and people in Plains, Georgia knew him not just as President Carter, but they knew him as Brother James. Because when you are before God, we're all brothers and sisters. Think about that, everybody. And think of this. He was a nuclear engineer from the U.S. Naval Academy. Brilliant, brilliant mind. And yet he was a peanut farmer. And he said, just call me Jimmy. Think about that, everybody. So like and share, thumbs up, thumbs up. Reach out to Bryce Green on Substack, support him there. And please go to X. He is there. Are you going to get on Blue Sky?
I'm on Blue Sky. Yes, I don't use
Okay.
the app as much, but I'm there under the same name.
I'm trying to get there. I mean, I just want everybody to know you and know where you are. And fairness and accuracy in reporting. That's how I met this young man. And you know, and I thank you, and I'm sending you so much love because I just think the world of you.
I appreciate that, Santita.
Oh, I appreciate you more than you know, young man. Sending you so much love. All right, everybody. I'm Santita Jackson, Bryce Green on the Santita Jackson Show. See you tomorrow, everybody.